Cook County Judge Teresa Molino Gonzalez back in August was warned by Cook County prosecutors that if you put Lawrence Reed on electronic monitoring, quote, could not protect the victim or the community from another vicious, random, and spontaneous attack. You know, the kind of vicious, random, and spontaneous attack he was facing charges for back in August in front of Teresa Molino Gonzalez and the vicious, random, spontaneous attack was knocking out a social worker inside the locked psychiatric wing of McNeil Hospital in Berwyn. The victim became irate and the perpetrator became irate, slapped the victim in the face with an open palm. Her vision went black and she lost consciousness for several seconds. One of the victim's coworkers rushed over and helped the victim walk down to her office. The victim was then taken to the emergency room, diagnosed with corneal abrasion, serious concussion, chipped tooth, suffering from daily headaches, nausea, memory losses, losing her train of thought when speaking to people, and so on and so forth. So that guy, August 19th, three months ago. If you put him on electronic monitoring could not protect the victim or the community from another vicious, random, and spontaneous attack. And Judge Teresa Molina Gonzalez's response, according to the transcript, I can't keep everybody in jail because the state's attorney wants me to. That was his 49th arrest. 10 for felonies, like the assault of that social worker at McNeil Hospital. 49 arrests, and you're saying it's just the state's attorney wants me to? There's no foundation for the want? And, of course, 3 months later, a spontaneous, vicious, random attack on the Blue Line on Monday night, lighting a woman on fire while saying, burn, bitch, burn alive, bitch. And that 26-year-old woman at Stroger Hospital with severe burns in critical condition. And then, as we talked about earlier in the show, compounding that is convicted felon, then pardoned by Clinton, Ralph Maychek, a month later, offers even more leniency to Mr. Reed when he modifies the electronic monitoring order to allow him to, get out and enjoy the community 3 or 4 times a week. 49th arrest, 10 for felonies. What the Cook County State's attorneys knew about this guy, what anybody could pick up about this guy. I mean, in court this week, he's pleading guilty, open outcry. He's calling himself a Chinese citizen. For more on this, pleased to be joined by Tom Weitzel, former police chief, the village of Riverside, Illinois. Tom, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning, Dad. Thanks for having me.
Well, we've talked about this before, but this is perhaps more focused than we've ever had. It wasn't the police. It wasn't the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. It's the judges.
Yeah, in this case, you're right. They usually can try to blame the police or the prosecutor's office this squarely on Judge Teresa Gonzalez. And, as you mentioned in your open here, 49 prior arrests, 10 convictions, and he has more. So I did a little digging. It's 49 arrests, but if you take in the charges, so some of those arrests, they had multiple charges, 3 or 4 arrests, it's up to 54 charges, okay? And it's she makes a statement that I can't keep everybody in jail because the state's attorney wants me to. My answer to that is yes, you can, because you're supposed to, at that first appearance court, you're supposed to look at the criminal history. You're supposed to look at the violence that took place, which means the crime. Was the victim injured? What's the severity of those injuries? And what's your likelihood of coming to court? And he had several failure to appears, which means he just skipped court. And I think she was sitting on the bench, and her statement would say to me, well, yesterday, she has a checklist on that bench. Yesterday, I held 6 people in custody. So today, I'm going to have to let 4 people out of custody. That's not how it's supposed to work. And in this case, the victim may very well die. So let's be honest. In this case, it could kill someone.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Because the Cook County State's Attorney wants me to, you're not doing anybody favors, Your Honor, and I say that with all appropriate sarcasm. You're supposed to do your job. The Cook County State's Attorney is making an argument. His public defender is making an argument. You're supposed to do your job. This has nothing to do with doing something for the Cook County State's Attorney or not. And but here's the other part of this, and it's interesting to note we haven't heard from our esteemed governor. This is in part and parcel of the Pritzker Purge Law, the so-called Safety Act, the Orwellian entitled Safety Act. This is also, you're supposed to, have blinders on with respect to previous bad acts, so that the defendant before you is not prejudiced because of prior bad acts.
For sure. And I haven't heard her because she's probably not going to comment. But if they have a spokesman for the Cook County court system, I guarantee you, Dan, they're going to say, well, the judge was acting within the law, meaning the Safety Act, and that they are going to push it back on the legislation, that she was forced to do this. But, her statement that she made about, you can't hold everybody the state's attorney want, it would eliminate that. But that's what they're going to say. They're going to say the state act of the Safety Act forced her to let this individual go. And I would say that that's ridiculous based on his criminal history and the severity of the injuries. The two things you're supposed to look at from the beginning. I mean, you don't give people, 49th and 50th chance. I heard somebody comment the other day, yesterday actually, that said, let's slow down before we judge this. Let's not move that quickly. I thought to myself, are you kidding? And that individual on the television interview said, the law, the Safety Act was built for equity and giving individuals second chances. I couldn't believe I heard that. This is 49 and 50.
Well, second chances, 50th chances, who wants to get hung up on the count? There's always a chance to reform somebody, right? And I want you to get I want to get your reactions to what Brandon Johnson had to say about this too, because of course he was asked, well, what are you going to do about the safety or the lack thereof on CTA? And by the way, we're talking about this case because it is so evil and heart-wrenching to think about the injuries that have been inflicted upon that young woman for doing nothing other than scrolling on her phone while she's going to and from wherever she was going to and from. But you had a woman attacked and robbed on the red line. You had 2 CPD burglary alerts issued on the green line. We're 3 months removed from 4 people being shot and killed on the blue line in Forest Park. Do we forget about that? How's that investigation going? And I know Brandon Johnson issued an executive order against vaping on the L, so that's really important. But here's so what else are you going to do? Here's his answer. See if you can help us decipher it.
This is an absolute failure of our criminal justice as well as our mental health institutions. The system that we had failed to intervene, and now we have a woman who is fighting for her life, and I am praying for her and her full recovery.
How will you specifically be changing safety measures on the CTA for riders who are moving forward?
Safety as a whole is my top priority, not just for public transportation. And so there are appropriations that have been dedicated specifically around safety, but even more specifically around homelessness as well as mental health services. right? So now we have a governing structure that will allow for all voices to come together to think strategically about where those investments should rest. And so it's going to be a combination of all three: mental health and behavioral health care services. So that's going to require person power, but also for the homeless, which includes our ability to be able to ensure that those who are unhoused are not relying upon the public transportation as temporary housing. And as far as how we show up with law enforcement or security agencies, those things will be debated, but just know that it's a top priority. I think it's too early to speculate like what that absolutely looks like, but again, the funding from Springfield is the most important thing. Without that funding, then none of this will be visibilized.
What I heard is a lot of funding for violence interrupters and social workers, and to the extent law enforcement has a role to play there, we'll debate it. Those are what I took away, to the extent I could extract anything sensible from that.
Yeah, that's just a bunch of mumbo jumbo. I couldn't extract anything from that because, in 2024, the federal government put out a report that Chicago's transit system is the second worst in the nation for crime. And, within the last month, the Department of Transportation sent a letter to the CTA saying, what are you going to be doing to increase security, or we're going to take federal funding away? So what have they answered that? Are they going to do anything? I'm sure, Dan, remember when the CTA had their own police force. I'm sure even some of your listeners might, right? They had their own force, and then that was disbanded along with the CHA police. It was disbanded, and Chicago took that over. Chicago is down 2,000 plus officers. They don't have the resources, meaning manpower, to do that. What are they going to do? Well, unless you put a police officer on every single platform and every single train, you have to have a better approach than sticking it all on mental health services or social services. That's an easy out. Okay, this guy, the services didn't work for him. Isn't that clear?
Yeah. Right. At least in the short term. I mean, if you were serious about public safety, and I understand Brandon Johnson is not, and most of the city council is not either. I understand that. But, I mean, it's just simple. But, I mean, I want perspective from somebody who's actually in law enforcement, not like myself. It's real simple what you have to do in the short term till the politicians figure out how they're going to envision these systems in the future, and the interplay between law enforcement and social work and penal institutions and mental health institutions, so forth. That's all interesting. But in the short term, we are going to surge resources, and we're going to make a big show of it such that everybody knows that they are going to be confronted if they get out of line on the CTA. That's what we're going to do for the foreseeable future, and we're going to repurpose resources from wherever we need to achieve that objective right now. That's, to me, what a leader would do if they were serious about public safety on mass transit. But you tell me.
Yeah, you're right. And you know what another short term is, Dan? That you hold people in custody, okay, until you figure out what they're. That's a short term answer. Not letting them walk out the door. This cliche of this revolving door. Well, that's true. You have to hold them in custody. And as far as putting resources into public transportation, there needs to be far more resources put in. But the mayor is going to blame not only Springfield but Washington. He just is going to blame money. They need money to do these resources. No, you don't. You're going to have to reshift those resources. He says he does it all the time. He's done news conferences where he said we're going to be moving resources to the neighborhoods. We're going to be new resources to when the DNC was here. Why don't you put in the same amount of policing that we had at the DNC into public transportation?
Tom Weitzel, former police chief for the village of Riverside, Illinois. Tom, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a great morning.
You too. And Tom joined us on the turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Don't get stuck with a cold shower this fall. Give CenterGuard Plumbing a call. Get a new 40-gallon water heater installed for just $1,195 for standard installation, or a 50-gallon heater for $1,295 standard installation. A proud new sponsor of AM 560, CenterGuard is offering specials on new water heaters.